Okay, folks, it is 5:30, so we're going to call our meeting to order of Bylaw and Policy Committee meeting. And we do have members of the gallery, so just for the benefit of members, this is a committee meeting, so primarily for discussion of council with regard to bylaws and policies. There is an opportunity to provide feedback in writing at a later time. We also have a public question period at our public meetings. If anybody did want to provide feedback, but correct, like not at this one. This one is just primarily for discussion for council and staff. So at this time, I would ask if there are any additions to the agenda. We do have 3 items for review. So without any additions, I would ask for approval of the agenda.
Just 1 second, Your Worship. Before we approve the agenda, can we change the order?
Yes. Yeah, sorry. Thank you for that. So there is no changes, but just a slight change of order. So according to our agenda, we have the proposed bylaw respecting Road Trails Act review. We have taxi bylaw review and travel expense policy. So we will deal with travel expense policy second, and then we will deal with taxi bylaw review third. If council's okay with that, yeah.
Your Worship, just in terms of your remarks there, I don't think there can be questions asked unless it's on the agenda, not for this meeting, I mean.
No, correct.
So I don't want to lead anybody the wrong way.
No, absolutely, no, absolutely. That's why I wanted to just set the stage, so to speak. So, any meeting of council is an open public meeting. So this is committee work of council. So this is primarily for discussion. It's not a decision-making meeting, but definitely welcome members of the gallery that are here to observe.
Well, that's not my point, Your Worship. My point is, you had mentioned that there's questions at committee of the whole meeting at the end.
No, our next public meeting.
Our next public meeting, but unless it's on the agenda.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, oh yes. No, thank you, Councillor or Deputy Mayor. So, no, that's a good point. So typically our public question period has to do with any direct agenda items. Okay. Approval of the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Contrary minded. The meeting is approved with just the amended order of the items. Our first item is the new bylaw respecting Road Trails Act review that is being proposed, and I will turn things over to Terry for a staff report.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we'll just go through some results of the study on the proposed bylaw. So at our last public meeting, staff were directed to draft a bylaw to allow ATVs to travel on all town streets utilizing draft bylaw prepared by the town of Yarmouth. This is a source of information that we had reviewed. So the Motor Vehicle Act, Off-Highway Vehicle Act, Bill number 273, Road Trails Act, Province of Nova Scotia Off-Highway Vehicle Handbook, Nova Scotia Off-Highways Vehicle Pilot Project Evaluation, Town of Yarmouth Request for Decision Bylaw under review, Road and Trail Act, Town of Yarmouth Bylaw respecting Road and Trail Act in the Town of Yarmouth, interview, Staff Sergeant Moran, interview Town of Yarmouth CAO, and we have a legal opinion that was rendered as of yesterday. So just a little bit on there is a lot of information here, and we've tried to boil this down to what's really pertinent and could be discussed this evening. So the Off-Highways Vehicle Act is an important act with respect to all-terrain vehicles and other off-highway vehicles. And there's multiple sections. It's a long act, but it's the primary act controlling those types of vehicles. It sets out where you can travel, what's permissible within the province of Nova Scotia, and with respect to what we're discussing tonight is what the highway travel, or where you can utilize your recreational vehicle for that purpose. And we'll get into that. So we went to the Off-Highway Vehicles Act handbook, regulations handbook, because it's it's in plain language for us to understand. So we're going to get into that a little bit later. Much of the discussion came around the need for the desire for all-terrain vehicles to utilize highways. And right now, the use of all-terrain vehicles on highways is prohibited, except on what's called K-class roads. And K-class roads are roads that are not maintained by Department of Highways anymore. So there was a deficit certainly around connecting trails. So a trail ends at point A, starts again at point B, and there's a road in between. And so that's the use of that. But we'll talk about the pilot project evaluation, which was done by a consultant. So context. October 2018, Nova Scotia launched a pilot project to test whether four-wheeled off-highway vehicles could safely use the shoulder and paved roadways. The project enables off-highway vehicles at selected sites to use provincial roadways to safely travel from one off-highway vehicle trail to another, or to access amenities such as gas stations and restaurants. It makes note that it's important to remember that off-highway vehicles are called off-highway vehicles for a reason. They're not designed for road use. For example, off-highway vehicles are equipped with very rugged, low-pressure tires, which are designated for unpaved loose surfaces and thus do not have the same handling characteristics on smooth pavement. Also, off-highway vehicles often lack the same safety equipment as motor vehicles intended for the road, example, signal lights. Ensuring the safest use of off roadways for motorists and other users are critical. So very much recognized in the drafting of an act, which we're going to talk about, but also in this pilot project. This is where the province authorized seven pilot programs. One at Porter's Lake, which was 110 kilometers, 110 meters. So these are relatively small areas. So the total of all seven was 15 kilometers. So small pieces of highway connecting one piece of trail to another. In Germany, in Lunenburg County, Weymouth and Digby, Walton, Hants County, Sherbrooke, Gabaroos, and Ship Harbor. So if anyone is interested, there is a significant amount of information on how all of the details on every one of these pilot projects, what trails they connected, what roads were used, and sort of the success and failures around that. But just to keep things moving for tonight, I think in general, when you look at the summary of what was happening there, I'll just read sort of the first paragraph of that. Keeping in mind that the data nuances previously noted in the methodology section, the pilot was largely viewed as positive by field staff, businesses, riders, and community members. It was seen to enhance trail connectivity and access to service for off-highway vehicle riders without significant degradation of pavement surfaces in most locations. So there was concerns about the effect on roads and shoulders and that type of thing. That didn't really pan out. And businesses, although they couldn't quantify how much, what sort of increase in business they had, they felt it was a good thing. So this is bill number 273, or the Road and Trails Act, is really it is the piece of legislation or potential legislation that will enable municipalities to move forward with more use of trails. And there's a few sections that may be important. So this is sort of the first paragraph, be it enacted by the government and assembly as follows. The act may be cited as the Road Trails Act. That's how it was referred to in other pieces of legislation. The purpose of the act is to enable the operation of off-highway vehicles on designated parts of highways to allow for trail and amenity connectivity. Off-highway vehicle means all-terrain vehicles, dirt bike, dune buggy, four-wheel drive or low-pressure tire pressure vehicle, snow vehicle, a vehicle belonging to a class of vehicle designated as off-highway vehicle for regulations. So when we look at the bylaw is going to refer to the enactment of this or the designation of a road trail within a municipality. And those are the vehicles that will be able to utilize the road trail. This is the important part. This is where municipalities get authority or will get authority in the future to make changes or allowances for the use of ATVs or other off-highway vehicles. The minister may, by regulation, with approval of the Minister of Public Works, designate a highway or part of a highway as a road trail. A municipality may, by bylaw, designate a highway or part of a highway that is not a road owned by the Crown in the right of the province as a road trail. So that is the paragraph. It's 5, subpara 2, that could enable a municipality to allow ATVs on our streets. A designation under subsection 1 or 2 may not include a controlled access highway as part of a controlled access highway or part of a controlled access highway. So with respect to controlled access highway, trunk 4, which is the road to the mill or the road that goes by the mall towards the 104, is a controlled access highway. So access across or on that highway is prohibited. And all other provincially owned roads that aren't designated. So Reeve Street would be another street that would be prohibited. Notwithstanding Section 11 of the Motor Vehicle Act, a driver may operate an all-terrain vehicle, a dirt bike, or another off-highway vehicle of class prescribed in the regulations on the highway as part of a highway that is designated as a road trail under Section 5, if the driver meets all requirements under the Act and Off-Highway Vehicle Act. So there are a number of regulations that have to be met for if this act is utilized to be able to use that, such as you have to have a driver's license if you're on a municipal street or a municipal highway street or a provincial highway. Where a road trail is restricted, and that's for use at certain times of day or certain times of year. So there is the ability, although we haven't seen that, of how you restrict the use of ATVs with more strict conditions than are in this legislation. No driver shall operate an off-highway vehicle on a road trail in the period between 30 minutes after sunset and 30 minutes before sunrise. But there's a number of other control issues that have to be put in place. As I mentioned, license, there's insurance requirements, and there's licensing requirements and a number of things. These are the rules and regulations, sort of in more plain language. Here's when you can ride an ATV. Forest access roads controlled by the Department of Natural Resources, so what we typically call pulp roads. K-class roads, which I talked about, controlled by the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal. And as I mentioned, K-class are non-maintained Department of Highway roads. Private roads that are designated or to be accessible to the public for an off-highway vehicle use where the landowner is given permission, ditches, highways, or a road or highway outside a city or village that is impassable because it is covered with snow. So you can get summer maintenance, but those roads are sometimes not plowed and they become available to ATV use. Where you can't cross, and this we mentioned before, you cannot cross or drive on on or across a controlled access highway. Most 100 series highways are controlled access highway, and Trunk 4 is a controlled access highway. So just going right into a little bit about Yarmouth. So the direction was to draft for discussion a bylaw that was based on the town of Yarmouth bylaw. So just a little bit about the town of Yarmouth and the bylaw. So Yarmouth County Rail to Trail, Yarmouth and Acadian Shores, an 87-kilometer piece of trail. It's similar to our rail to trail facility in Inverness County, and it has a situation where there is an end point on the trail, and that trail then turns into a street in Yarmouth. It's called Water Street. So there's 2.5 kilometers, and then you pick up the trail again. And that's because the railway actually was part of Water Street when the railway was connected. So Water Street was really an historic industrial type of street when the railway was there. So the railway was actually there, but it became a street. So for the last 15 years, they've been trying to find a way to put access from one end of that trail to another. And so that's and when they look at the Road Trail Act, then they look at it as an opportunity. So again, this is sort of the start. We can show you sort of the start of the trail, and then sort of ending down toward the end of Water Street. So this is the bylaw, very, very simple. The bylaw permits the town bylaw to designate a highway, whereas the Road Trails Act permits the town bylaw to designate a highway or part of a highway as a road trail. This bylaw is known, it may be cited as the Road Trails Designated Bylaw. And there's definition of highway, definition of road trail, and then all it is the town hereby designates all of Water Street as a road trail within the meaning of the Section 5 of the Road Trails Act. So within the Road Trails Act, there's all types of off-highway vehicles. It's not restricted to ATVs. So they've chosen to adopt all of the work of the province and to move that way. It is possible to have further restrictions on that. I might just mention as well, showing the sort of the zoning map. Water Street is probably, if you look at the different colors, we have waterfront industrial, waterfront open space, floodplain, Water Street commercial, industrial. If you look at here, this is downtown commercial. There's some residential, small amounts, and some high density residential, but it's primarily an industrial type of road. So as I mentioned, we asked our solicitor for a legal opinion, which is obviously, if we're interpreting law, it's very important, and there's a number of pieces of legislature that's appropriate here. So from our solicitor, with respect to the Road Trails Act, the Act received royal assent on April 12th. But as of this date, which is yesterday, the Act is not in effect and has not been proclaimed in force. So the Act is not in law yet. Also, to this date, there are no regulations published under the Act. So when an act is being created, what happens is that there's regulations that go along with the Act. So there's a process of creating the Act, creating regulations, and when regulations are are ready, that goes to legislature for assent, for proclamation, I'm sorry. So that hasn't happened yet. We don't know the timing on that, but we do know that laws can take it. This can take several years, or it can take a shorter period of time. There's certainly any number of bills on the legislative assembly docket that have been there for quite some time. As an example, there's a number of examples, and I won't go there. Anyway, the other part that's of very much importance. In review of the act in the legislature, bill reading, it appears that the intention is to give the municipalities the discretion to pass bylaws that will designate specific municipal roads as road trails for the purpose of enabling the operation of off-highway vehicles to, one, provide connection between trailheads, to access existing trails, and or to provide access from a trail to amenities along the road trail in the municipality. In particular, it appears that the intention is to provide such access from the trails that are developed by and under the supervision and care of local clubs of all-terrain vehicle associations, of the All-Terrain Vehicles Association of Nova Scotia. The clubs nearest to this area would be Cape Breton West ATV Club or the West Richmond Riders Association. Currently, there does not appear to be any trailheads off the existing designated trails in accordance with definitions under the Act, or club supervised trails that connect with the boundary of the town until such time that such a trail reaches the town boundary. The Act, as intended, does not appear to apply to the town. So basically saying the intention of the Act is to allow access to roads to connect one piece of trail to another, and Patrick Leamy is saying that it's not the case and the Act does not apply. Just sort of a summary of findings. The Nova Scotia Off-Highways Vehicle Pilot Project appears to have been received positively for many aspects. The ability of the town to consider this bylaw is reliant on Bill number 273, Road to Trails Act. And as of this date, the Act is not yet in effect. It has not yet been proclaimed in force. As of this date, there are no regulations published under the Act. Currently, there does not appear to be any trailheads for existing designated trails or club supervised trails that connect within the boundary of the town. Until such time as such trail reaches the town boundary, the Act, as intended, does not appear to apply. Enforcement of off-highway vehicles on our streets is challenging. That's from the discussions with both our municipal neighbors and our staff sergeant. Resident concerns with respect to noise and safety issues appears to be considerable. Further consideration for discussion. Discussion with neighboring all-terrain vehicle associations and ATV Association of Nova Scotia with respect to potential developments connecting our town. Exploration of options to connect to future trail facilities within the town. Community consultation with the RCMP as an enforcement agency. So, Your Worship, that's the presentation with respect to this bylaw.
Yeah, thank you very much, Terry. So we'll now open up the floor for questions or comments to the CAO with regard to the staff report.
Well, Your Worship, through you, I just, a lot of this is new to us and to me. It looks like we got the horse before the cart here. If we don't have, if the act is not in place, and it says we can't do a bylaw until the act is in place, then I don't see where we can write up a bylaw at this time.
Councilor Madden?
No, I agree with the deputy mayor that we couldn't probably put forth a bylaw right now without the act. But I'm not against, I guess, looking into it further with council. I know with dealing with the RCMP, the RCMP don't force the all-terrain vehicles. That would be under natural resources. They have full jurisdiction over that. So talking with them might be helpful. I did do some exploring myself, and it is coming. It's going to be here. Maine, for instance, because we had a letter, and the person that wrote the letter actually put a lot of information in that was US information that really doesn't apply to us. But Maine, I checked with Maine, and they allow their all-terrain vehicles to move back and forth to trailheads and stuff, but they're not legal on the road. But they also state that I think their neighboring state is New Hampshire. So if you live in Maine and you go down and register your all-terrain vehicle in New Hampshire, which do allow them on the road, once it has a New Hampshire plate on it, it's allowed to be driven in Maine. So I did check it in our neighborhood, Atlantic Canada, and I believe New Brunswick. Actually, the little blurb I read was they were tired of chasing them, going from trailhead and stuff, so they legalized it. And not recently, but a year ago or so, I did talk to Transport Canada in Ottawa about all-terrain vehicles coming up from the US. And they would be legal here on our streets if they're plated in the US, and it would be the same as in New Brunswick. If you plated your all-terrain vehicle in New Brunswick, it would be legal to drive in Nova Scotia. And that's the way the country works. Like if you plate your car here, you can drive in BC. So I think, as the deputy mayor said, it's a little premature, but I think we should continue the work on it because it is something that's going to come. It's very popular in the US and Canada, and come up with the right solution. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to thank Terry and staff for doing the research that they did do on this. And I've learned a lot through this process as well. But like Councillor McIver, Deputy Mayor McDougall have said already, I think we need to wait for this act to come in place. And I think we should continue to work on this. So when the act does come in place, we'll be ready. Also, community consultation is going to be key. Education is going to be key for the residents and for us as well. And I think that we should have the opportunity to have some community consultation and have people come in and talk about it who deal with this on a regular basis.
Thank you, Your Worship. So for sure, I mean, this is a moot conversation that we're having. There's no legislation. There's an act that hasn't been proclaimed. So to me, like going through this exercise, and I've heard from people as council, there's so many pressing issues that you have to be dealing with currently. Why are you engaging and entertaining this? And I respect that. I understand where people are coming from. And personally, my own opinion is I don't support us continuing to do research and looking at this topic in the eventuality that this act is going to get proclaimed, when we know through our own conversations how much work our municipal staff are doing on many other files that are currently ongoing, and that each of us at various meetings have acknowledged that, the workload that our staff have. And to put something out there just for the sake of investigating, to me, I do not think is an appropriate use of our valuable staff resource. So I, for one, would not support that. if the act gets proclaimed and then council at that point wants to entertain that, well, then we'll ask for staff to do other research on it. But I'm sharing my opinion, and we've received correspondence, and each of the councillors and the mayor has a package tonight from emails and correspondence that we received from residents of the town, and all of which that I've received, and I'm sure each individual councillor has received their own contacts. I've had messages, I've had emails and texts from people, and all of which definitely express strong reservations. I had one person speak to me directly that expressed support and thought, this was a beneficial thing for the community, just as Councillor Coyne asserted when he introduced this, that it had economic benefits for the town. And people have made the point, you've got to weigh economic benefits with safety benefits, with quality of life issues. How much is the actual economic benefit to the detriment of quality of life issues? And, I don't think it's enough to say, well, some restaurants might make some money, we might sell some gas, so we should disrupt the whole community. And I mean, what was put forward was not a street. It was the streets of the town of Port Hawkesbury, which, is way beyond what was being proposed or thought about in this legislation. So anyhow, those are my comments, and pleased to hear, well, obviously we're not moving forward with it because there's no legal rationale to do such a thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. I do just have a couple of questions, Terry, if you don't mind. So you noted that you had some conversations with the CAO from Yarmouth with regard to their plan. So was there a mention of the length of time? Like, what was the process with regard to, the idea that was brought forward from the time? Was there community consultations? And I understand that it's still ongoing. They still, I don't know if they've passed second reading, but they're obviously limited, the same as everybody else would be with regard to the act being finalized. I'm just wondering if you could comment on what did that process look like?
Sure. That was a 15-year process. So they've been wanting to put something in place to connect the two pieces of trail, 87-kilometer trail that's very well used in that part of our province. And there's been considerable community consultation formalized just recently before they considered the bylaw. And for them, it's a very positive thing. So they connect the trail through primarily industrial commercial street with a small section, relatively small section, 2.5 kilometers. And it's the people of not only the town of Yarmouth, but the surrounding communities really look forward to this for quite some time. Yeah, so very different circumstances. What he did say, there are still many challenges. There's no regulations yet. So regulations deal with things like signage. So there's no standardization of signage. So we really rely on something called tax standards or the Transportation Action Committee. They have a standard list of signs. They don't exist for this type of thing. There's no regulations to say what you have, how many signs that you have to have, where you have to have them, or even what they look like. There's a number of things that they're struggling with. Education, those things that will move ahead in a certain amount of time. That's why they haven't announced second reading or further actioning of the bylaw until a number of things are in place. And as we see, you couldn't enact a bylaw that's where you don't have legal jurisdiction, and a town, any municipality will not have legal jurisdiction until there's laws in place. It's not at this point in time.
And so that's where they are in terms of their progress towards completion.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Another question that I had, I noticed there was something that referred to significant degradation of pavement surfaces. Like, so I'm learning a lot about ATVs as of late. I don't really understand fully what are the impact to, I would like to understand what are the potential impact to our streets and our asphalt surfaces. And also, yeah, and I guess the other question that I have would be around policing. If there were, rules in place, if we were to even look at it later down the road, like who's going to police this and how would we control that?
Sure. We're not certain, so the act is really designed around rural areas. So it's about an ATV traveling on the shoulder of the road. It's not really, it certainly can happen, and the law allows that to happen, but that's really what it was designed around. There was concern within the pilot around the large, low-pressure tires tearing up the shoulders of the road and the pavement surface. And there are reports of that had occurred, but there wasn't enough information to say, yeah, no, that was a big issue. So it never really, although it was thought to be an issue, they weren't able to show that it was an issue. So that wasn't a big consideration after the pilot evaluation. One of the issues with the tires on an ATV is they have smaller bearing, so they have a smaller surface area that connects. They're low pressure, so you don't have the same type of control that you would have in a car. So that's the concern that was brought up when you're operating an ATV on pavement, but specifically on roadway.
And in terms of like being able to police and control, I know that we certainly heard a lot of concerns from citizen feedback with regard to that, and also that's just an innate concern that I had as soon as the bylaw was introduced in proposal form. I have heard complaints of ATV use currently in the town, and obviously it's illegal use of ATVs. So I'm just curious if there was going to be contemplation of council with all the ducks in the row, like for the Road Trails Act, we would have to have some kind of connector to an ATV trail to be able to use that piece of legislation to enable that. And somehow have a pathway to amenities to be able to do things correctly within that act. So I'm just curious in terms of who will control who's licensed, who's not, who's speeding, who's not, who's abusing those rules for a road trail. Whether, say, for example, we pilot one road that's designated to bring ATVs and users from a trailhead to amenities, that's a big concern of mine, just being able to make sure that when things are, and I do understand, not to be dismissive of ATV users, I know a lot of avid ATV users will, certainly follow the rules. I'm talking about the ones who are currently breaking the rules now. They might not, if they're breaking the rules now, they may not be all that keen on following the rules, if there were rules in place at a later date. Those are just my concerns and questions for future consideration. Obviously we don't necessarily have the answers now, but just.
Well, just to clarify, it's clearly the body having jurisdiction is the RCMP. So any vehicle on the road is under the jurisdiction. Any person on the road is under the jurisdiction of the RCMP, and they are charged with enforcing that, and only they can enforce that bylaw. If there's an ATV on natural resources property, then it becomes under the jurisdiction of natural resources and the officers that are peace officers that are appointed under that body. But any vehicle on the road is under the jurisdiction of the RCMP. My discussions is without going into any detail, because I don't think we have to. It's difficult. ATVs currently on the road illegally are difficult to enforce.
Your worship, just to your point, I mean, this, really, I don't know that there's much need to carry on a conversation about this, but in terms of policing, we're challenged as it is with the current individuals that are driving their ATVs illegally on the streets of Port Hawkesbury. Complaints about ATVs up and down Tamarack Drive, Macquarie Drive Extension, Emery Street, all hours of the day, and individuals that have modified mufflers, that are loud, and they're all over town. And the members that we have, I don't know what really, in terms of policing, what's happening and what actions they've been able to undertake to try to curtail that. All I'm hearing is complaints from residents saying it's not happening. And the reality is our current complement of, I can correct it because there's two members of council that are on the police advisory committee, but I think the town, I just had asked before the meeting what our complement of officers that we pay for, and I guess it's 6.5 positions, which includes the staff sergeant. And at the moment, we have the staff sergeant and 3 positions filled. We have 3 vacant positions. And so that, not that it's just the 3, there's a kind of a shell game that gets played, because we do have the benefit of having members that are posted here in town that cover parts of Inverness County and parts of Richmond. So it would be disingenuous for me to say we just have 3, there's more. But even with the members that we have, we're challenged with those sorts of issues. And I'm sure yourself and other councillors have heard those complaints, and people get extremely frustrated and annoyed, and even with those limited number of incidents that take place, that's a safety concern too for people, where we're encouraging people to get out and be active and walk on their streets, use their sidewalks. And so anyhow, policing is a major issue around that.
Thanks. Any other questions? Or we can certainly, I guess I would just conclude this bylaw policy committee item just by also noting that out of the staff report, it seemed like there would be pending issues with access for Henry Street. So I mean, if there were an opportunity to look at making a connection similar to the Road Trails Act, I guess it would, I'm just thinking of the example for Yarmouth. I mean, that was a 15-year endeavor. I think future conversations, and I know Councillor Coyne did mention it as well as Councillor McIver, it's going to take a lot of conversations. You know, we definitely want, like, if something does come or present itself as an opportunity to explore, like, we have to make sure we cover off everything from safety to community consultation to anybody who might potentially be in an impact zone with regard to a potential project. You know, that ATV trail, how was that going to be developed and then brought into the town or close to the town? I mean, there's a lot of moving working parts to an idea like this. You know, so certainly, you know, it's great that we went through this exercise to kind of explore this as an opportunity. And I just want to, you know, thank council for their questions. I want to thank staff for the staff report. That I will add was done in a very short period of time. And you know, thanks also to the members of the gallery here today, but also all of our residents and also stakeholders that did take the time to send in feedback to the town. We definitely, as a council, embrace any kind of feedback that citizens would like to offer us on this and any other topics. So we'll move on to travel expense policy.
I don't know how many slides yet.
I don't know, very many. 2.
so travel policy review. So we provided a notification that we would be reviewing the travel policy at our May committee of whole, I believe it was, and we went through these slides at our June committee of whole. That's why the date on there is June 20th. That's not advancing, but that's okay. I think you have
Here,
to
let me
click
click
on
on it here.
There we go. Okay. So the reason we went through this process was the last time that the travel policy was updated was in 2016. There was a request from staff, both staff and council, to look at the policy, particularly around the rise in fuel prices. And in looking at other mileage rates that were in other travel policies through a jurisdictional review, we were low in comparison to other policies. So we thought it was important to bring an updated travel expense policy to council. So we did that in June. There we go. And we provided an updated policy, which was primarily consistent with our previous policy, but updating the mileage rate to 57.7 cents, which was the provincial province of Nova Scotia's rate. And we matched that we intended to continue to match our mileage rate to the provincial rate, so we wouldn't have to continuously go back based on fluctuating fuel prices. Also, we included guidance on hospitality expenses, which is a provincial requirement, so we provide kind of cleaned up the policy a little bit and ensured that it was meeting the current standards of the province. At that time, there wasn't consensus to move the policy forward. And council was to provide feedback if they wanted any amendments to the policy or had any feedback or review that they wanted to happen, which I haven't heard anything from council. So just looking for some guidance on where we're at with this. If we want to continue to review it, if there's other questions we have, if we're comfortable with it, we can move it forward. I think we had said possibly to the October public meeting. So just looking for some guidance on that draft policy.
Okay, so any questions or comments for Aaron? Councilor McCoy?
No, Your Worship, I'm quite comfortable with what's been prepared and
Okay,
presented.
perfect. Councilor Ryder?
Just one question, Your Worship.
Sure.
You did say that this policy is going, once it's in place, that you'll be able to periodically change it to the provincial standards? Or does
So
it have to
the
come back?
mileage rate will be linked to the provincial mileage rate. So typically April 1st of every year, they reset their rate. So this would be this rate would be consistent with the rate that is set by the province of Nova Scotia.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councilor Point?
No questions.
Okay, so it seems council's comfortable with moving that forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so our next item, I know Councilor Point has declared conflict on, so we'll just give him a minute. Okay. So the next item and final item that we'll be discussing is the taxi bylaw review. Terry?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So earlier this year, we had concerns raised by some taxi owners with respect to the number of taxi licenses that are given out by the town. At that time, on our last review, we were asked to take that back to council. So we're taking that back to council with a little more information on other municipalities and what they do as well. So just as a reminder, so we had two letters just stating that it would appear that the number of taxi companies has increased substantially over the last year, and asking that we identify a maximum number of company or licenses, that business licenses that would be given out. So a letter from Isabel Hudson and from Jeremy White from Dave's Taxi, or Lake Handling Incorporated. So that was a request. Just a little bit of research that Melissa had completed actually. So Town of Antigonish, they've removed the limit And so there's no limit right now, but because of limits in the past, there's 2 operators there. There's only one in Pictou. Town of Stellarton has 1 operator. Yarmouth, council decides when there's a new license issued, and they have 5 operators there. Amherst, there's no limit, they have 4 operators. Truro, there's no limit, they have 4 operators. Bridgewater's no limit, with 6 operators. Westville, no limit, 2 operators. And Digby, no limit with 6 operators, but they are, their council is reviewing the imposing of a limit on the number of licenses that are given. I'm sure the council is as aware as I am the number that we've had in the past. So we had, for a number of years, we had 3 operators in place. And then we went down to 2 operators for some point in time. And then this last year, we've had 2 operators, 2 new licenses granted. But they're single taxis, one and single drivers. So 2 companies, but just 2 more taxis, not more than 1 taxi per business.
Okay, just a quick question. So what kind of formula would you even use to determine a cap, like per capita? Like, is there some, like for the ones who may have had limits in the past? Was there any kind of formula they used to even determine that? I mean, in our population really is kind of hard to nail down because of course MSCC every September there's an influx of students and all throughout the year also short-term training. Yeah, so I'm not certain how we would go about, it's, to have a concept, but how do you like put that into practice, I guess would be my question.
Well, I think the idea is that it's market driven, so the demand is going to dictate how many licenses how many companies are going to be able to operate in that and still be financially viable. So the market will look after that itself.
Any questions from council?
Just through you, your worship, Terry, you confirm how many operators we have? We have 2 operators or?
4.
We have 4 operators.
4 operators.
2 that are new this
Right.
year.
Yeah.
They're single cabs.
And the other 2 operators have how many cabs?
I'm not certain. I don't have that number.
I'll certainly find out.
Yes.
Councilor Donovan.
Question to Terry through you, your worship. Digby is no limit, but going through, are they looking at limiting their number of operators?
They're considering it. So I did, because that's a large number for 2,000 people, so I did talk to them. Again, 6 taxi companies, but 1 taxi. So it's one person, part-time job that has a taxi. So like it's not really apples and apples when you look at this. But they've been getting they've been asked to consider it the same as we have for the same reasons.
Okay.
So what is the wishes of council with regard to what's been asked of us or proposed? I mean, you don't have to make the decision right here,
No, well,
right now, but like, what's your thought process?
It's nice to make sure and guarantee that you have a taxi business in your town, because a lot of people depend on it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like survival of the fittest, I guess, and it makes a stronger cab company at the end of the day if you can withhold. I don't know why we would limit it.
Thoughts?
No thoughts at the moment.
Councilor Corey, what's your thoughts?
Similar, I guess, really to what Councilor McIver said. How do you, I mean, there's a rationale on behalf of companies that send us correspondence that it's more difficult to be economically viable if we have more competition, but then, I mean, we can't dictate other types of business in town either, or in terms of how many stores we have, grocery stores or whatnot, and it then becomes survival who's more efficient and encourages business to operate differently too, I suppose, if you had more competition.
Okay, so, I guess, it's sounding like maybe this is not something the council's open to at this time? Or do we want to maybe do a little bit more digging? Like what would an option look like if we were to consider what Yarmouth is doing? So maybe if there is a business case presented that, you know, council could consider it, or maybe it's a limit, maybe it's no limit, but yeah, go ahead.
Your worship, through you, I'm just wondering, you had mentioned that there's an influx
There is.
during the school year or community college. I'm just wondering if there's some way of taking that into consideration and I don't know if we can limit partial. Is there a way of, I'd like to know exactly what Digby is going through. I see they only have 2,000 people. We're probably a little over 3,000. And you don't want to lose taxi drivers either.
Go ahead, Councillor.
No, through you, your worship, just Terry, can you elaborate, Terry, about Yarmouth? Where you have decided by council, you just do it on a case-by-case basis, or?
It's my understanding. I haven't had detailed conversations in one email.
Right.
With their CAO, but yeah, so that decision becomes a decision of council, so you have to look at, you know, is there adequate coverage? Is there complaints about not being able to get a cab? Is there that type of thing?
Because they may have, through you, worship, in their summer months with the cat and that, they may have more a part of the year and less another part of the year decided by council. On the one would be complaints of no cabs, and two, on the other side of the coin would be for many cabs, depending on the time of year.
I think these companies work a lot outside of town too,
Okay.
and also have other courier type of work that happens concurrently, and there's the businesses are probably a little more complex than you would think.
And probably those numbers, the number of operators, like if you dig down into that, there could be one car, like you mentioned for town, one car operating for one operator, 10 for another operator, so. What would council like? Would council like to see a little bit more information with regard to potential options?
Question through you, your worship, to Terry. Like, I guess we had no complaints, I guess, from operators that things were rough, like, you know, they weren't doing enough calls or to sustain. We haven't had any of that, have we?
We've had 2 letters, so from the two more established companies.
Right.
That they were concerned about increasing the number of cabs in town because they didn't believe that the work was there to sustain that.
So they believe it's oversaturated at this point in terms of cab companies.
It hadn't been, but this was actually, the letters were prepared before those companies were actually licensed. So there was concern that this would affect that. If it's a wish of council, I can get more information on this. So there's 2 ways to do it. So council decides, or we don't have a limit. I can get more information on the Yarmouth model and what they consider and how they do that.
Yeah.
If that would be of any help.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, through you, your worship, our bylaw, I don't think there's no language in there that says that council makes a decision. It goes through the CAO. You grant the licenses.
Yes.
Excuse me. So if it was to come back to council to make the decision, that wording would have to be changed somewhat, that if somebody applies for a license, Terry would come back to us with the information, and we'd have to make a decision then whether or not to grant it, to add another cab. But if we're not getting, I mean, pre-enterprise, like, maybe,
Yeah, it'd be interesting to get a little bit of perspective maybe from
you know,
Chamber.
to me, it's a hard thing to do because you're limiting.
Yeah.
And, you know, you could have somebody come in, a retired person that needs something to do and starts up a cab company. And if he has really nice cars, who are you gonna call?
So, yeah, so maybe if staff can bring us some options, we can consider it at our next bylaw and policy
Yeah.
meeting. Yeah, like I have a little bit of mixed feelings on council deciding, because I mean, it's almost like we're in a position to pick business winners and losers, and
Right.
I don't know if that's really our role as a council.
I don't,
But if there were a successful formula based on multiple factors, like such as current population, also influxes of population, as myself and Deputy Mayor have mentioned, and, you know, I don't know what that could potentially look like, but, yeah, so I guess once we have more information, we can consider it at our next meeting. Thanks. So anything else with regard to the taxi bylaw review? Okay, I would ask for a motion of adjournment.
So moved.
Do we have a second?